start the meeting now. My name is Dan Moulton. I'm the chair of the Dallas Sierra Club. And I want to welcome everybody, especially you first-timers. Could I see a show of hands for people who are attending for the first time tonight?
In how many years?
How many?
In about the last 2 decades.
Okay, well, I'd like for you to make sure you get our form up here and sign up to get our free e-newsletter and all that stuff. Good stuff. So we have the forms. This is right here? Right up here for you to fill out. Get the free e-newsletter. You'll know what's going on with the Sierra Club in Dallas. We also have some brochures. Don't we, Ginger, or not? About 2.
We've got 200.
We have 200. If you want one of these brochures, you can sign up to join the Sierra Club. Right on those brochures, find out more about the club. Arthur, do you want to do Sierra Club 101 after the meeting? Sure. All right, well, after we adjourn the meeting, back in this corner here, Arthur Keene, one of our real old timers, will do. He's a good old timer.
Treasured season members.
He will do everything you always wanted to know about Sierra Club, but were afraid to ask, in about 10 minutes in that corner back there, okay? Now, if you've been watching these slides before the meeting, you see it's an introduction to most of our officers, and that's going to be in lieu of introducing people. You can just watch these slides go by. Most of the committee chairs will be coming up to give a report. Sure.
Don't look anything like the pictures.
Younger pictures.
Well, you know how that looks like Joe E. Brown. Anybody remember Joe E. Brown? Who the heck is that? Courtney Love? Okay, enough levity. Are there any announcements that need to be made that aren't part of the committee reports before we get going with our committee reports? No. Good. So now we're going to start with brief reports from each one of our major committees. So let's start with the Gouldies, Chris and Dick, and we will give our Conservation Committee report.
All right. As usual, I have a clipboard to pass around. This does not have anything to sign up. If you're going to sign up for the conservation update emails, I'm going to ask you to go to the Dallas Sierra Club website and sign up there yourself rather than signing on a piece of paper and having me do that for you. What we have coming up in the month of September is a whole lot of opportunities. This Saturday, if you live in South Oak Cliff, you may know that there's a Super Bowl down there, the South Dallas Super Bowl between Lincoln High School and Madison High School, and there will be the first event of the global climate strike in Dallas will actually be on the 14th. That will be a banner drop, and I have information about it here. If you want to take part in that, you can email Tamika Darrow. On the 17th, beginning on the 17th, the City of Dallas Climate Action Plan will have another series of meetings that you can attend as citizens. They will be all over town. Rita is going to tell us a little bit more about that. Rita Beving. She's on the committee.
Thanks, Chris. Actually, the long name for this is the Comprehensive Environmental and Climate Action Plan, or CCAP.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, really. How many of you have heard of it? All right. Well, this is the year, folks, that you can get involved with these series of meetings coming up on what input you want that Dallas can do for its community regarding climate change. There is a stakeholders group of more than 36 people working on this: business, industry, environmental, community, and environmental justice advocates from all over town working on this plan. We just had a meeting last week. And there are meetings on and I'm going to hand some of these flyers out for those of you interested in going, and Chris is sending out an email. September 17th, the 19th, the 24th, the 26th, the 30th, and October 3rd in various parts of towns where you can give input. One thing I suggested, folks, is if you've never seen a climate plan, there's many cities who have done one. Austin's on their second one. You can go look at Denver's and other cities to see what kind of actions they've taken. So what we're looking for is public input on the CCAP. And then what we're hoping is by looking at what the emissions inventory, what possible actions there are, to present it for a vote in front of City Council on April. And then after that, implementing those actions. Now, some of you know we have 7 brand new people on the Dallas City Council. So you all can be very instrumental in influencing that because we have 7 new people to educate. So I'm going to hand out a few of these flyers. I'm also going to give you my email address. If you want to email me about the plan, Molly Rook is the representative for Sierra Club and 350.org Dallas. My email is Rita, R-I-T-A, period, Beving, B as in boy, E as in Edward, V as in Victor, I-N-G as in girl, at gmail.com. And I'll be around after the meeting if you want to talk to me about it. Thanks, Chris.
Okay. We have on the board here, we have the climate change walk through downtown. There's a date that's not on there. That's this Saturday in the morning. There will also be a climate walk if you want to join us. You can go to the Dallas Sierra Club website conservation page, and it will link you to the place to sign up for that. The Global Climate Strike event at the end of the pedestrian bridge downtown ought to be a lot of fun. I have heard many versions of what we're going to do there. Some say it's going to be like a New Orleans funeral, and some say, oh, we'll get umbrellas. And actually, I don't know exactly what we're doing because this is being put on by a coalition of about 30 organizations, and they all have ideas, right? The Global Climate Strike Week is listed on here, and then there's also a petition. Cookie already sent in her signature on the petition to the National Park Service to please keep their policy against single-use water bubbles, to keep that litter out of our parks. So there's one clipboard is going around. I'm going to start this one around. Next.
Chris, is that the national park when you have in your hand? Is that one of the right?
Yes, it's the National Parks policy.
Is that on?
I don't know, is it on?
Yeah, it's supposed to be. Testing.
Brookhaven Spence.
Do we have another mic?
Sure.
You're being well heard. The acoustics are good.
Okay. How's that?
Right.
Okay, next let's do outings. Mark Stein and his crew are going to come up and tell you what's going on with our very active outings program.
Let's see, and this,
Yeah, not too close.
okay. Like a retainer, but, okay. Here's what's happening that's fun in outings. We actually brought back 27 people from the Pecos Wilderness bus trip a week ago. Luckily, that's the same number we started with. This weekend, you've got a choice of 2-day hikes. One is a suburban walk at Breckenridge Park in Richardson, and the other is the climate change hike that Chris just told you about. I've been on the climate change hike, and it's great. If you can't do it this weekend, it's offered at 2 other times, and I think you would enjoy it. It's an easy hike, but a fun one. And so will be the suburban hike at Breckenridge. The following Saturday, another day hike, excuse me, it's not a day hike, it's a bike ride from Mockingbird Station. It's a 17-mile loop over to White Rock Lake, Deep Ellum, downtown, and back to start. And then on October 12th, better known as Columbus Day, there is a hike at Canyon Ridge Trail at the Fort Worth Nature Center and Ridge. This will be a relatively easy hike, but it will take most of the day to do it. Then I'll jump ahead to the next big bus trip we've got. We're going to Big Bend National Park. This is an annual event for us. The dates this year are February 5 to 9. The announcement of details and the ability to sign up will start somewhere around the 1st of October, maybe just a couple of days into September. And I would suggest signing up in October if you can, because this trip typically fills up. Details are online at DallasSierraClub.org. And in between, just between those day hikes and the Big Bend trip, we've got a great outing in the middle of October. Liz, tell us about how much fun it's going to be at Beavers Bend State Park.
Welcome, everyone. I've sent the pictures, but I don't know what order they're in, so I apologize for that. My name is Liz.
Liz, do you want the clicker? Or do you want it just set?
I'll just put this here. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. But as Mark said, we have one of the most fun outings, I think, I'm a little biased, but one of the most fun outings of the year. This is for everyone. All of those of you who looked at the outings list at some point or another said, oh, I might want to camp, I might want to hike, I might want to paddle, I might want to bike, I might want to fish, I might want to sit with a book on the patio. This is for you. The youngest we've had is 8 months old age, 8-month-old, and we've had all the way up to 84, I think, is our record so far. This is for everyone. So you are all welcome. I'll flip through some pictures here, and like I said, I'm not sure what order. We have a group compound that was built by the CCC. This place is rare, it's hard to get. I was on a 4-year wait list before we got it, and we did it and had so much fun. It's turned into an annual event. I believe this is year 8 or 9. So it's basically huge lawn out front, a bathhouse with hot running water, showers, flush toilets. It's luxury. And then it also includes some rustic cabins and then a lawn out back, a little hill that goes down to the river with these big shade trees. So you can bring a tent or you can be in a cabin, all the same price of only $40 for the entire weekend. We got this way. This is the front lawn with our tents. You can pull your car up and hook the front door of your tent to your car door if you want. That's how close you can get. So like I said, you can sit and relax. This is in our dining hall. You can go on a hike. You can go by yourself, you can go with our leaders, you can go for a half hour, you can go on Arthur's 9-mile up and around the ridges, and a few in between. Like I said, it's for everybody. The kids have a blast. We go slow, we have other kids coming. It's for everybody. A lot of people have made it a family reunion, brought their grandkids every year. This is just part of the hike. It's a little bit level up and down, medium. There's some harder around the ridges, or there's some flat places too. So just some fun hike pictures in the woods. Sometimes we have a touch of fall color starting, which is always a real big treat. The rock formations everywhere are just gorgeous. It's one of those, if you're into geology, one more reason to come. And there's actual fall, unlike what we have here kind of too. So the date, Friday, it's the third weekend of October, 18th, 19th, 20th. From the afternoon on Friday till Sunday. It's, that third weekend. On the website, you will see there's a link to what's called our trip write-up. It's a PDF. It'll have all the information. At the end, the last couple pages are the forms that you fill out and send me with your check. The sooner you get it in, the better. The sooner you get it in, the better chance that you'll get one of the cabins. Because obviously, we have kind of unlimited space on tents, but the cabins, we have 12 of them. So that's a little harder, a little more challenging. Some of them are duplexes, so we can fill them up, but it's just one of those things. We have a fun optional dinner Saturday night. I have a guy who does a barbecue chicken and brisket and the whole spread for us for Saturday night. So if you want, you can pay $15, go out hiking all day and come home and dinner's made. So a lot of fun. We'll do game night in the evening. I'm still working on trying to get a little bit of a program for that evening. Breakfast, light breakfast is included. There's always chocolate somewhere. I don't know what more to tell you. Everybody raise your hand that's been there before. Okay, look at all these hands. Keep your hands up. Who did not have a good time? There you go. Testament. Wendell.
Liz, I have approached EarthX Films about getting the End of the Canyon film. I don't know if we're going to be able to get it or not, but the Saturday night entertainment will be a lot of fun no matter what we do.
Yeah, it's always a lot of fun, and Wendell has done some really wonderful programs for us and has one in his hip pocket that he could pull out also. So we'll have some fun. Like I said, games, it's kid-friendly for everybody. So I really encourage you to come. If we do break even or a little over break even, those are the monies and outings we use to help to pay the leaders that have to have their wilderness first aid, things like that. So you're kind of supporting the club, but it's also a really wonderful time to just meet other people that like to be outdoors. Also, I'd love for you to help me spread the word. I have these flyers, and I have some extras over here on the outings table. If you have a place at your work, your church, anywhere that you could put them up, please do take some. And if not, if we run out, just email me. My email address is on the contact information for the trip, and I'll be happy to email more to you. So I hope to see all of you there. It's so much fun.
Thank you, Liz. Let's do our membership chair next, Ginger Bradley. She's going to tell you about our picnic and some of the stuff that's for sale.
Hi, I'm Ginger Bradley, membership chair. If you're not a member yet, we'd love to have you. It's only like the rock bottom price of $15 a year for a single membership. So also we're having the yearly picnic on September 29th. There'll be free food, giveaways, money, calendars, God knows what. I have a whole case of stuff to give away. So that's from 10 till 11 a.m. or 10 till 1, excuse me, on the 29th at Churchill Park. You can get the details on our website. Also, we have calendars now. They're only $12 this year, so please come and get one. I have some change in case you only have 20s. And then we have the shirts, of course, for $10 and $15 also. So please join us, and thank you very much. Kurt?
You say the calendars are only $12 and they retail for $16?
Yes.
What a deal.
It's quite a deal. Yes.
Just for you.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you, Ginger. David, let's do David Griggs, our political committee chairman.
Hold that weird thing.
Yes. Unless you want to just do it by.
Well, I have to hold something.
There you go. It's not hard.
Okay, I need 3 hands, but I can do that. Hi, David Griggs, the political chair for our local group. Want to tell you about an election. How many of you knew there's an election this November? Raise your hand. Ah, great. Well, every odd year, we have an election for the constitutional amendments that our legislature passes in the January through May regular session. And so this year we have about 10 of them. And the Sierra Club has weighed in on at least 3 of them that I want to tell you about. You know, if you get in and you vote and you kind of wonder, well, you know, should I be for this or not? We're going to give you a little background on at least 3 of them. Hopefully you have one of these flyers that it's been passed out in different colors. Some are black and white, some are but the same information. And I want to go over the 3 amendments. If you can remember amendments 2, 5, and 8, I don't care what you do on the others, but 2, 5, and 8, we really would like for you to vote yes. With regard to Proposition 2, this allows the Texas Water Development Board to issue general obligation bonds for the Economically Distressed Areas Program. The bonds would be used to develop water supply and sewer projects in economically depressed areas. You know, water is a basic right, and it should be available to everyone, regardless of their economic condition. And this would help assure that that water is equally distributed. So we're definitely in favor of Proposition 2. Proposition 5 is one you've probably heard something about. If you've bought anything at a sporting goods store, you know there's a sporting goods tax. And before now, that money went to the general fund for the legislature to do with whatever they wanted. And it often ended up in the rainy day fund. Well, Proposition 5 would allow that tax, which you've got to pay anyway, to actually go to what it was intended for, which is for Texas Parks and Wildlife Department and for the Texas Historical Commission. And that is to have upkeep in parks and in historical places. So we're going to put the money where it was intended to go with Proposition 5. And obviously, as the Sierra Club, we're completely in favor of that. And then finally, Proposition 8 creates a flood infrastructure fund as a special fund outside of the general revenue. And this would also have a one-time infusion from the rainy day fund. Would be used for flood control planning and to establish and maintain flood control structures and drainage infrastructure in the state, both structural and non-structural. This is to help us become more resilient when we have our floods and our hurricanes. And with climate change causing much more monumental climate changes to our state, we want to be ready, and Proposition 8 creates that flood infrastructure fund for those emergencies. So our ask is that please vote on November the 5th, I believe it is, and be sure that you support at least Propositions 2, 5, and 8. Early voting, if you'll see on here, is October 21st through November 1st, and then the actual election day is Tuesday, November 5th. So please keep that in mind when you go to vote in November. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question?
Yes.
What kind of turnout do we expect, and what are the implications of that?
Well, turnout is always very low in a proposition election like this. There are a few people races. There's a special election in District 100, but unless you live in District 100, you're not going to be voting in that. That's to fill the vacancy that Eric Johnson left when he was elected mayor. It's going to be a special election to fill that state house seat. Houston's going to have a mayoral and city council race, so they'll have a big turnout down there. But here in North Texas, it should be a fairly low turnout. So that means that your vote is much more valuable, you know, when it's a low turnout election. There's been no real opposition to these props, but we want to make sure that they pass by a wide margin. Because if people don't go vote, then the few people who are against everything and go vote against everything, you know, could, you know, call the day. So we want to make sure that there's enough support for that. Did everybody get one of these? Some of you on the front didn't. I've got a few for you. That's all. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, David. Before we get to the program, which is coming up quickly, I promise I want to introduce important officers who don't make a committee report. our treasurer, Arthur Keene, over here, and our secretary, Christina Barrera, back there. And the guy behind the green curtain is John Lingenfelter, my right-hand AV guy. Okay, now. Are you done destroying our
I'm
curtain?
done making a mess of things.
Next, we're getting to the program. What?
Did I miss my opportunity to make an announcement before the committee started? Was that-
Yes.
Okay, good.
What do you want to do?
Dallas County Community Colleges Sustainable Summit, November 9th, all day November 9th at, I think it's going to be at Eastfield College. So all the colleges get together, they have this one day. I've been involved for a few years. About 50% of it is shilling for various companies. The other 50% is probably good stuff. So if you have a day to spend at a sustainability summit and listen to various speakers talk about sustainability, it's online, you can register, there's no cost, you get a meal, well, you get a little bag of stuff, and that's it. So if you, Dallas County Community Colleges Sustainability Summit, it's every year, this year, November 9th at Eastfield College.
And who are you, sir?
John Bryant.
Who?
You didn't recognize it, John.
I'm John Bryant.
Oh, that's John Bryan, everybody.
I mean, I know some people here. No, I'm just going to be one of the presenters, that's all.
Okay. Now, we'll get to our program for the evening. Let me introduce our program co-chairs, Renee Robertson and Victoria Howard. And they're going to introduce the speakers.
It is lovely to see all of you here tonight, both veterans and newbies. We are so excited to see so many friendly faces and to always have you here as part of our environmental family. I am so happy that I get to introduce our next speaker. Charles Cruven is a winner of the Sierra Club's 2010 Art and Service to the Environment Award for his book, The Living Waters of Texas, which is here on the table. Tonight he'll be speaking on his current book, Riverwoods Exploring the Wild Niches. Our meeting does end promptly at 8:30, but we will be staying later to offer you these wonderful books at a special discount rate Charles has agreed to for our Sierra Club members. So please, after you visit with Arthur and find out the ins and outs of the Sierra Club, we will be here happily taking your orders for books. So, Renee, do you have anything that you want to add?
No.
Without further ado, Charles, thank you so much for being here.
This goes.
Can we put this in a pocket?
Sure.
Pick it here or just hold it? Like this? Okay. So how does this sound? Not too loud? Just about right?
Yep.
So, my name is Charles Cruven. I like to take photographs of Texas rivers, streams, creeks, and springs. And I started with a book called The Living Waters of Texas that your former president, Ken Kramer, edited and helped me get published. This talk is about the Neches River. I don't know how many of you have canoed the Neches. Is there any hands that I see? 1, 2, 3, not too many. But you probably had a great time nonetheless, I bet. It's a very wild river. It begins east and a little south of Dallas. It begins in a pasture. It goes into a ditch. It goes along a road. And then it turns to the southeast and becomes the Neches River. And then immediately it becomes this lake, which is right up here in the left-hand corner. And that's called Lake Palestine. The next interesting feature is that little green rectangle that goes along 36 miles of the Neches River. That is where Dallas had proposed to build Fastrel Dam. That was about 10 years ago. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife objected to Dallas building another reservoir. Dallas built Lake Palestine as well for its future water needs. And this case went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and the United States Supreme Court ruled against Dallas, and the Neches River has a spectacular wildlife refuge that, if I could, I would bring all of you there to go canoeing for a couple of days. You might see beavers, river otters, herons, bald eagles, coyotes, bobcats, all kinds of snakes, all kinds of birds. It's really a spectacular place. The Neches River is the most intact river ecosystem left in Texas. And down at the bottom, which is way over here, this becomes part of the Big Thicket National Preserve. And so the Neches River is the heart of what is considered one of the most important biological areas in Texas. In fact, it is recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So, we have a very special river in East Texas. As a photograph of me canoeing in a place called the Big Slough Wilderness, it looks like there's lots of water, but it's actually just a big, deep pool. This is the beginning of the drought that started in about 2009 and peaked in 2011. And this is when we began this photography project. So in the very beginning, I didn't really want to do this book. I didn't want to canoe the Neches River. I didn't think it was an attractive river. And I was sort of hoodwinked into it because I owed a favor to a close friend named Adrian Van Dellen. And he took me to a beautiful place first and said, "Look, Charles, look how photographic it is. The only waterfall in the Neches River." And I said, "You know, that looks pretty good. Okay, I might consider doing this." But in fact, this is the only waterfall in the Neches River. And after that, it was pretty much the same river everywhere we went. It turned out he really had a need. He needed me to help him get down the river because he wanted to photograph Neches beavers. And everywhere we went, he tried to find a Neches beaver to photograph. He took photographs of nature beaver feet, maybe 200 of those. But he never got a photograph of a Neches beaver because they didn't want to be photographed. He camped out in little blinds that he would set up by a beaver lodge, but the beavers always got away from him. So this went on for 2 years. Everywhere we went, I'm trying to take photographs, and he's only interested in Neches beavers. On one of our really interesting trips during the drought, we went below B.A. Steinhagen Dam, which is 2/3 of the way down the Neches. The Neches is a 400-mile long river. And we camped when the river was so low that is the bottom of the river, just that sand. And I took these really interesting photographs of what should be under 10, 20 feet of water. All that wood is normally completely underwater. Kind of an abstract shot. You can even see how it's all pockmarked from sand hitting the wood. That's a mussel that has done a little trip in the wet sand. It looks like a hieroglyphic symbol. And so we're at this campsite. This is the lower part of the Neches River, and we see a little river house that we go inside because it's open. And then my friend Adrian notices the name Eason painted on the front door. And he realizes we're in the wrong house. We should never be in an Eason house. You probably know a little bit about this, but the lower part of the Neches River is where the dog people live. And these are the very people that came from Appalachia in the 1800s when the Neches River was a lawless part of Texas. In the early colonial days, France and Spain couldn't agree on the border. Was it the Neches? Was it the Sabine? So this was an ungoverned area, and it filled up with criminals, American criminals. And they're still there. And they're called the dog people because they came with these dogs called cur dogs, and they lived off the land by telling their dogs. They always had some extraordinarily intelligent lead dog, and they would say, we're going to hunt pigs, we're going to hunt bear, we're going to hunt white-tailed deer. And that dog would understand and lead the other dogs, and they would go find bear or deer until the white-tailed deer went extinct in East Texas. The East Texas black bear went extinct. They were so good at this that they wiped out these two species. So anyway, back to the Eason River House. Adrian's very alarmed that we've been in this house, and we decide we should get out. We should get back in our canoes and start down the river. And we hear something coming from the woods. And I think we're in terrible trouble. And it's just coming straight at us out of the woods. And I'm ready to say, I'm so sorry. It was just my mistake. Don't get upset. And instead, what comes out of the woods is an armadillo. And he jumps down on a log, runs across the sand, and bumps into Adrian's foot. And sits on his haunches and looks at Adrian like he's trying to memorize his face. Now, Adrian is a scientist. He's not very superstitious like I am. I thought the armadillo was like an Eason in a different shape. So I start to apologize to the armadillo. And the armadillo seems to accept my apology. He walks into the river, and maybe you don't know this, but armadillos walk on the bottom of the river. They don't actually swim. So he just disappears. We don't know where he goes until he comes up on the other side. So he walks out of the river, gets up on the bank, and he turns to look at us, and I wave at him because I think that's what I should do. And Adrian says, this is really crazy, Charles. And I say, Adrian, we need to get back to my truck as soon as possible before the armadillo tells the Easons we've been in their house. Because my truck is parked in Eason country. And I have already talked to one of the dog people and asked them to protect my truck. Not that I expect them to protect my truck, but at least I've talked to them. So we canoe as fast as we can. We get to my truck. I am absolutely certain it's been taken apart, and it's in great shape. Nothing's wrong with it. It's even unlocked. I forgot to lock it. So we take my truck to get Adrian's car, who's parked on a farther where we started the canoe trip, and his car won't stop. The dog people have taken a hammer and put a hole in his gas tank and siphoned off all of his gas. So there we are in this dog people country, and we can't get out with his car. So we get in my truck, we drive all the way out to a gas station, we find a sheriff, we ask for help. The sheriff says, gentlemen, that's not my jurisdiction. And then he says, is there a body? No, you're on your own. So it turns out there's an agreement between the law enforcement and the dog people that they get to do what they want to do on the Neches River. And if there's no body, you're just on your own. We only went here once. And we're really happy that, we only lost a gas tank full of gas. So most of the trip was fantastic. If you've never been on Village Creek, maybe more of you have been on Village Creek, I suspect. It is one of the 10 best canoeing creeks in the United States. It's mostly protected. It's a major tributary to the Neches River. There is a canoe rental place in Silsbee that any of you could go and have a great trip. It's about a 35-mile long creek, and this is toward the headwaters. Those are cypress knees. It's very beautiful. This is just sand and water and little worm tracks. Reflections of cypress knees in a slough. Beautiful sunrise reflections. And there's me. And as you can see, the drought is so intense that the water should be at least halfway up that bank. So that's about 6 feet higher than that. And this is what it was like. Just canoe 50 feet and then have to get your canoe over a fallen tree that should be underwater and easy to get over. And sometimes it would take us 2 hours to go a mile. And this is a very long trip that we end up on this sandbar or gravel bar. And we were supposed to be done with this trip within 6 days. And it's the 9th day. And my former wife has called the Cherokee County Sheriff to come look for us because she told them there are 2 old men on the river and I don't think they can get off the river. So a helicopter comes across us and starts asking us questions. Things like, are you Charles Crudan and Adrian Van Dellen? And I am so surprised that man could pronounce my name perfectly. I am very suspicious. I think Adrian is in trouble with the law, at least. And then they circle back and they say, you know, do you need food? Well, we're eating the last of our food, which was a can of tomato soup and some pine nuts. So we say no. They come back, do you need medical attention? And we say, what do we look like? Are we, that old? So he leaves us, and it's an okay trip, but trying to canoe the Neches River when it's this low, I do not recommend. Does anybody have an idea how this came about? This is an oxbow. An oxbow is a former channel that gets cut off. The river moves to a faster pathway, and it leaves a big curve that looks like a crescent moon. And this is an oxbow. The wind is blowing from that side to the red side, and that's duckweed that's been pushed against that log. And then on the other side, all the duckweed has been pushed away, and you see the tannic colors of the Neches River. So it's a perfectly natural photograph, and I only saw this once, and when I went back to this place, it was completely dried up and there was nothing there. And that was one of the most exciting things about the Neches River, is that every trip was completely unique. We canoed in every month of the year, during every season, including months like August and July, when we were dying of heat and bugs and drought. And we also went in the really cold months of January. At some point, we were canoeing a river that was the river gauge was 1.7 feet high. And then we went later when the rains began, which really haven't stopped, and it was at 28 feet. I thought at 28 feet it was going to be just the easiest trip you could ever have. It turned out to be the most difficult kind of a trip. So this is a guy, he's trying to point me towards the river channel because I can't find the river channel. And we're just wandering around a river that should only be 100 feet wide, and yet it's 2 miles wide. And we don't know where the river is. There's just water everywhere. And instead of being a fast trip, it's the slowest trip because we don't know where to go. There's no way to know. Everything's underwater. This is how it should look in a normal dry year. This is in a winter when the fog comes off. Again, this is like easy travel because it's so low. I'm waiting for this big flood photograph. This is a flood photograph, the first of many. And this little piece of land is a tiny little island that we have camped on. And this river is the same river, and now you can see it's about, 200 feet across. And yet it gets even bigger with more rain. And the Neches is so dynamic, and it has such a wildness that I can't even express to you how unique this river is compared to the other Texas rivers that are so kind of managed. They're never out of their banks. They've got lots of reservoirs. When this one floods, it covers an enormous area, and it provides water and nutrients for a multitude of plants and trees. In fact, There are 4 oak trees in this photograph. You can't really see them off to the side, but they're a chinkapin oak, and a water oak, and a willow oak, and an overcup oak. And all it takes is a few inches of elevation to separate them from their perfect habitat. And they're all capable of being underwater for weeks, even months at a time. Then the river dries up, and they're just as happy as can be. It's just unbelievable. So I was telling you about Adrian and his beaver ideas. He's at it. He's really hungry for a beaver photograph. This is a photograph of a beaver lagoon. Off to the right is an island where a beaver and her baby are living. I find this place for Adrian. I tell Adrian, there's a beaver in this island, let's keep going. He says, no, Charles, we're gonna camp right here. He sets up his camera on a peninsula with his big photographic lens pointed directly at the beaver house and says to me, I'm gonna stay up all night and get up every 30 minutes and just start taking photographs. I'm sure I'm gonna get a photograph of a beaver because they've gotta come in and come out. So I go to sleep. Next morning I get up and the beaver, I don't know if there's a beaver there, but Adrian says, come here, I got something important to show you. Look at this, Charles. He starts showing me his photographs on his camera. Did you see that? Did you see that? I didn't see anything. There was nothing in any of the photographs. Charles, look closer, look closer. Adrian, there's nothing here. Look, there's a stick, and then the stick is gone. You see? There is a beaver in there. Well, yeah, that's good, Adrian. And his eyes are sort of blinking, and he's drinking coffee, and his hair is all frazzled, and he's just sort of losing his mind, and I have to be careful with him because he's likely to go off at any moment. So the sun comes up, and it's just this beautiful fog-covered photograph. Is fantastic. It's one of the most exciting photographs I took on the Neches River. As you can see, most of the photographs are green and brown and a little blue. So to get a brilliant orange, yellow, red photograph is really exciting. And guess what? Adrian comes up with this great idea. Okay, I can't get a photograph of a Neches beaver. I'm going to put a game camera right on this beaver lodge. Now we've known about this beaver lodge for a long time. We call the beaver that lives there the godfather. Sometimes we call it the godmother because we can't really be sure. And yet this beaver is never photographic. We never get to see it. It never comes around. Sure, it comes around at 1 o'clock in the morning to slap its tail by our tents, but that doesn't do us any good. So he puts his camera on this beaver lodge. The rains start, it's 2014. He says, Charles, we've got to get out there before my camera is underwater. So we go out in the beginning of a horrendous flood. The rains are getting ready to come. And we get to the camera and he gives me the card to look at to see what images are on it. And the first image is this incredible great blue heron. It's as if, okay, Adrian, here's the best I can do. Look at me. I'm the most beautiful bird you've ever seen. And I tell Adrian, this is a great photograph. You're going to be so excited. And he goes, is there anything else? And I can't even speak because there's the Neches beaver. And you can see the water is rising. The beaver is obviously leaving the lodge because it's getting ready to go completely underwater. And for the first time, Adrian is content. He is satisfied that he has an actual Neches River beaver photograph. I don't think beaver photographs are very rare, but apparently this is a very rare photograph. He moves his game camera to various places. The river is just coming up all the time. And this is actually a place where we've camped, and it's all the way underwater. So that's a mother and her fawn. The mother is feeding on a very rare plant that grows on the Neches River called the Neches River mallow. If you know mallows, they're these gigantic flowers. It only grows on the Neches River. And it's just this great big hibiscus flower that looks like it belongs in the tropics. There's a coyote looking at his camera. He's the only one that actually knows something isn't right. Until Adrian had this photograph, he'd never seen a coyote on the Neches River. I had seen them a few times, but they are so skittish. The Neches River allows, there's hunting all year round, basically, is what I'm saying. So they're shooting every time we're out. There's constant shooting. And all the creatures are deathly afraid of people. And it was very difficult to ever see anything, except at night they would come close. The coyotes would come around our camp and make a lot of noise. But it was rare to ever see them. And because I was using a camera called a 4x5, which is what they used to use in the old days, you have to use film and you put this dark cloth over your head. When I would do that, the animals didn't know who I was. And they would come close and I would get to look at them because they were wondering what I was. So I got to see a beaver walk up on shore to try to figure out what I was. I got to see coyotes looking at me. But Adrian was always just out like a normal person, so they always disappeared. This is a red-headed woodpecker. They come to the Neches River in late winter to mate and make babies. They only go to the old growth trees on the Neches River. They make beautiful, happy clucking in their colony together. It's like they're always checking in with each other. They're exquisitely beautiful. They're very social. They only nest in old growth trees. This is an old pine that has expired, and it's the perfect kind of wood to make a good hole for a woodpecker to have a nest in. The Neches River National Wildlife Refuge isn't really a complete refuge. It only has a small strip that's been purchased, and otherwise there's private ownership and there's still logging going on. But that little strip is an intact old growth forest, more or less, and it's fantastic for wildlife. This is a Neches River otter. Not very many Texans have seen otters. They went extinct through the entire state of Texas in the 1930s, except for the Neches River. And from the Neches River, they've been expanding. No one traps them anymore. No one cares about them. They used to want to kill them because they ate catfish. They used to want to kill them because they could sell their pelt. You can see those great big claws. That's how you can tell their footmarks on the beaches. The beavers have webbed feet. It's kind of easy to see. And the otters have these big, deep claws. And they also drag their tail behind them. There's still not that many otters on the Neches River. They need approximately 18 miles for a breeding pair. The Neches River National Wildlife Refuge is 36 miles, so there's really just 2 pairs of mating otters. And they go up and down, and we had many, many encounters with them. Sometimes they had babies, and that was always the most delightful because the babies are just like, my God, mother, why didn't you tell me about these creatures? I've got to go take a look at them. And mother's saying, stay away, these are bad, this is bad. And the kids are saying, what are you talking about? Look at these people. And they would come right up out of the water sometimes and walk right up to us. They were so curious, like little puppy dogs. And the mother all the while is yelling at them, get away, come, come, come. And sometimes we would just see the adults, and the male would usually be very aggressive, and he would come towards us, and maybe he would get on a log, and he would sit up, and he would hiss and bark, and just make all kinds of noise. And then you'd watch him turn around, because he's waiting for his mate to swim away safely. So every encounter was so exciting. The river otters are just amazing. And the Neches River is the best place to go see them. This is the cover of the book. This is a campsite that we went to over and over, where a major tributary entered the Neches called Hurricane Creek. And Hurricane Creek itself was a wild, natural stream. And we camped on various sides of it, sometimes on the right-hand side, which was where Hurricane Creek entered. And sometimes we had to camp on the high side when the river was up, because our campground would be underwater. Every trip we made into the refuge, we stopped here. The Beaver Lodge was just about a half-mile downriver, so we had ample opportunity for Adrian to go chase beavers and for me to take all these wonderful landscapes. This would be probably December. All the green is gone. You can see through the woods for the first time ever. It's kind of quiet. There's ducks. There's coyotes, there's bobcats, but a lot of the noise of summer and spring is of course very quiet. This is Hurricane Creek when it's flooding. You can't really tell, but I can't see across it. Normally it's about 10 feet across. Here is probably a half mile across. I'm just on the shore. The whole forest is underwater. This has all been protected by the refuge. This is a natural forest. It's not being logged. It's rich with nesting herons. The yellow-crowned night heron loves to nest in this area. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. This is Hurricane Creek in winter. Those are called river elms. Those short little squat trees with the tree limbs that actually go all the way over and touch the river elms on the other side, so it protects the river during the summer. It creates a complete canopy. And there is a special warbler that they call the canary that comes in the summer and loves to stay in those river elms. It's brilliant, bright yellow. It has a beautiful warbler call, and it nests on the Neches River. This is during the flood. That's called the black gum. So you can see, this is as beautiful as a river can be during flood. All the silt is illuminated by the sun, so you get that kind of, I used to say muddy, but he would always correct me and say, we never say the Neches is muddy, we call it mocha or caramel, but we don't ever say it's muddy. So here we are. This is the island. We're camping on an island, and that is the actual water coming up from underneath our island and starting to liquefy our entire campsite. I'd never seen anything like this before. I'm expecting the water to come over, but it's actually coming up from underneath us. And I think we're going to have to flee. And Adrian is saying, don't worry, it's only going to go up 1 more feet. I don't believe him. I put out sticks during the night. I go check these sticks. I see the flood is still coming. And yet, Adrian was right. It never actually flooded our entire campsite. And so I was able to take this photograph the next morning when right by my tent there were these pockets of water that had come up. It's kind of exciting. It's like this blue mud, and you can see the part of the leaf is still dry. And in the end, the whole thing is just a pool of water. That is a blank. We don't know why. This is again a flood photograph, which became a big part of the trip because from 2014 to the end of the project, that's what we saw, was just flood after flood. It was amazing. Here it is in winter and the river is flooding. Those flooded trees are normally where we would have our campsite. There's fog. It's beautiful. Sometimes we would have these extraordinary animal experiences. One time I was in camp by myself and I saw a carp on the surface of the river laying flat, like it was trying to get a suntan or something. And I just thought, that just doesn't look right. And then I saw its tail in the air, like it was, I don't know, doing yoga in the water. And I didn't think that looked right. So I canoed over to this carp, and I still didn't understand what was wrong. I thought, And I asked the carp, are you hooked in some way? Do you need help? And it would pull its head up and give me this big bold eye, yeah, I need help. But I didn't understand what was going on. And that carp would struggle and struggle to get out of the water to show me what was wrong. And I could see that it was caught on something, but I could never see what it was because the water is always so muddy. So finally, it makes this intense effort to flip its tail up out of the water, and there's this alligator snapping turtle attached to its body. An alligator snapping turtle is probably the rarest turtle in North America. There are scientists that study this turtle and have never seen one in the wild. The Neches River is one of the last places where they live in a natural wild state. They live on the bottom of the river, and in the middle of their mouth, they keep their mouth open, is a worm. It looks like a worm. It's a little appendage that's pink and it wiggles. So fish come by, they get kind of curious, they get closer, and then they go in for that little pink worm, and the turtle snaps shut. Alligator snapping turtles have gotten up to 250 pounds in captivity. The one I saw was probably 25. Still, a 25-pound turtle is really big. Once the carp shows me the turtle and the turtle sees me, it dives. They both just disappear under the water. And I think, I bet they're going downstream. I just start canoeing downstream, expecting them to go that way. There's nothing down there. And then I hear this commotion upstream. And then they're upstream. And the carp is desperately trying to get loose. And so I canoe over there just in time to see this big pool of blood spread around my canoe. And that was the end of the carp. So the turtle got his meal. This is called the Sandy Bluff. It's the safest place when the river is flooding, which is it is right here. You could always be sure that if you got to this place, you could be safe. No amount of rain could make the river get up high over your canoe. But unfortunately, we lost my canoe near this campsite. Basically, I believed it was the beavers that took my canoe. Because there was a beaver dam against this cliff, and Adrian was messing around on that, putting his game camera there, stomping around, moving twigs out of the way, moving logs out of the way, getting a better shot. Look, Charles, I've got this great shot. When the beaver comes out of this hole, I'm going to get a clear shot. And I'm telling him, don't ever do this. Leave the beavers alone. They're really kind of a dangerous creature. They have messed with us every time we've been out. So one morning I get up and I go down and my canoe is gone. And there is a wet spot on the tree where I think the beaver stood up, leaned against the tree, and untied my rope. And I think it was a beaver because he left behind my paddle and my life jacket. We never found my canoe. We don't exactly know what happened to it. This is a flood photograph of water coming up into the forest. Those are pine needles. The pine trees never grow anywhere near the water. They have to be high up above. They don't like their roots to be wet. So the river is about 20 feet up. And I'm camped way far away. Adrian is out trying to photograph herons. I don't want to have anything to do with what he's doing because I think he's just crazy. There's tornadoes, there's rain, there's wind. I have a companion. It's a black vulture that is nesting in a deer blind, a deer stand that's basically underwater. And that's my only friend for 5 days while Adrian is off trying to photograph herons. And this black vulture is not really happy to see me, so every time it shows up, I can't move. I have to be like a statue. She has eggs in this blind, and there's no nest. They're just on the floor. And there are these beautiful blue-green large eggs. And so I go up in there and I look at them and I just try to leave them alone. And then one day I go up and look at them and she has pushed them together as if she wants them to talk to each other, as if she's trying to sense that they know that I've been coming around. And the mother wants her little babies and the eggs to feel like they have a soulmate. Because that vulture won't go in if I'm moving. So I have to stand still for 15 minutes and it hops in and sits on the eggs. I hope that they hatched, I assume they did. But finally Adrian came back and we were able to leave the river. This is actually from the Sandy Bluff in winter during another flood. Everything's underwater. On this trip, Adrian tumped over in the wintertime. And he had hypothermia, as you probably know. And I was really worried for him. But he is such a hardy guy that he managed to make it out to the next campsite. I don't know, he's unusual. This is a beautiful photograph of a river elm. That's the kind of the root structure they have. That's Spanish moss. That's a sweet gum leaves. And those are cypress roots. It's kind of an unusual combination. It's in an area where a major tributary called the Angelina River meets the Neches River and it forms an area called the Forks. The Forks were one of the last wild parts of the Neches River. There were so many sloughs and flooded areas that it supposedly had the last black bear and the last ivory-billed woodpecker. As you know, the ivory-billed woodpecker was native to this part of East Texas and went extinct in about 1947. They sometimes have thought that they had found some in Cuba, but it turns out it's only the pileated woodpecker. The ivory-billed woodpecker can only live in only nest in a certain pine tree called a longleaf pine tree. Maybe some of you have heard of like longleaf floors or longleaf pine tree barn, because this wood was impervious to insects. And it made for great ship masts. It made for great barrels, and they cut it down until only 1% of its former habitat was left. So they cut down 99% of these trees, and they never have really come back. They could live for 500 years. It take 200 or 300 years just to become an adult. And they were the dominant pine tree in East Texas. And the dominant pine tree now is called the loblolly pine, which is like a weed. It's the same tree that grows outside of Bastrop, Texas, where there was a big fire. And all the great trees are gone, except some of these oaks. That's Adrian and I. We are, it's spring. We're having a great trip. We're so happy. We start playing a game of tossing oranges. We're in this field of flowers. There's birds all over the place. It's comfortable. Everything is easy.
Did you use the animal camera to take that shot?
No, that's actually Adrian's natural bird camera. We just set it up, put it on a self-timer. And this is photographs from the area where the Spanish moss hangs on everything. I always thought that looked like a praying mantis.
Yeah.
So I always kind of like those kinds of images. This is more of the same. This is a drowned tree, and it's got lichen and a little Spanish moss and a little bit of sunlight, a little bit of the blue from the shade. This is towards the lower part of the Neches, in the Neches River National Wildlife Refuge, where it starts to snake just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You think you're making a great distance, but you've only gone like 50 linear feet, but you've just been canoeing for 20 minutes. And when it floods, you don't know where you are, because the whole place is underwater. And then towards the end, Adrian decides he's done with the beavers. He's now going to photograph great blue herons nesting. So he asked me to come help him. He wants to teach himself how to scale a tree. He's 75 years old. I say, no, I'm not going to help you. That's the craziest idea. I don't want to have anything to do with it. You're on your own. So he makes this, he photographs himself. He's shooting an arrow up into a limb so that the belay line will come back down and he can attach it to his equipment and pull himself up. And he just wants me to know that he's doing this, so he takes this photograph. He gets up into the top of this pine tree. He puts up 2 game cameras, and one of them, they're both on this great blue heron nest. And there's a nesting female in there. And about a week later, the tree is struck by lightning. And one of his cameras is at the bottom of the tree in pieces. And he assumes the other camera is destroyed. So he doesn't do anything for 2 or 3 months, just leaves that camera up there. He doesn't think there's any reason to go get it. And finally we finish our trip, the book is over, we're not working on the Riverwoods book anymore, and he climbs that tree and he finds one of the cameras and brings it down, and it has 5 photographs on it, and then it's blank because everything's been erased. And the last photograph we put in this book is a great blue heron on its nest, calling to its mate at night. And that basically is the program about the Neches River.
Questions?
Questions, please.
You did the whole length of the Neches?
We canoed the entire length, 400 miles.
You
Yeah.
got down there that rocket section that
Oh yeah.
Natchez and
Yeah.
Nacogdoches.
We went all the way down to the saltwater barrier, which is outside of Beaumont. Because the Neches is now being partially dammed, there's not enough flow as there used to be. So they built this gate across the Neches River, so at high tides they block it, so the salt water doesn't come into water supply. It's effective so far, but it probably won't work in the long run. Any more questions?
Charles, how many dams are on the Neches below Palestine?
There's only one more dam below Lake Palestine. It's called V.A. Steinhagen. It was built in 1947. It's a small lake. And yet the locals, the dog people, are still angry about it. They say it ruined their river because they live right below it. So it traps all the silt that used to go down into the big thicket. In fact, the lake is so full of silt, its lifespan is over. And some people want to just dismantle it because it's more than 50% full of silt. And it's just so shallow that you can get out of your canoe in the middle of the lake and stand in mud. Other people say, no, we don't want to do that. Let's raise the dam 10 feet, buy out all the people that are living around the lake, and then we'll have a new lake again. 50 years from now, if they do that, it'll be the same thing. The biggest dam, though, is called Sam Rayburn Lake, and that was built by LBJ, and it is on the Angelina River, which was this major wild tributary for the Neches. It's 120,000 acre feet. It's enormous. V.A. Steinhagen is like 17,000. And this is also one of the greatest bass fishing lakes in Texas. Yes?
Debbie, what was your question? What makes it wild?
That's a great question. It's because there aren't but the 2 dams on it. And in that long length, it gets to be a natural river. The tributaries aren't dammed. So it's got this fresh natural flow. So there's a pulse coming in all the time. And the river itself is constantly pulsing. Sometimes it's going lower. Sometimes there's a little rain somewhere and it starts to pulse up, and you can kind of see it over, if you put a stick and then you come back, 12 hours, it'll come down an inch, or maybe it's went up 6 inches. It was always in movement, and that's what made it wild. So everything around it, all the bushes, all the trees, all the bugs, all the crayfish, all the raccoons that knew when the crayfish had to come out of their holes to get away from a flood, they all were in tune with this river. Now sometimes when the river would flood, the crayfish, they have to leave. And you go out and you just see hundreds of dead crayfish because the raccoons know the same thing, and they wait, and they eat the tails, they pull off the pincers, eat the tails, and throw away the body by the hundreds. The river otters also are absolute connoisseurs of crayfish. If there's crayfish, they don't eat any fish. They just go for the crayfish. And they make these huge mounds when it comes out the other end of crayfish cells. And that was the first thing that clued us that there were river otters, because we actually didn't know there were river otters. No one was talking about them. So the crayfish are one of the most important food source in the Neches. And it's so amazing on the Neches that we had a gentleman come from West Virginia who has the only crayfish laboratory in the United States, and he finds a new species immediately, a completely unknown species, and he says, I can't wait to come back. I don't know how many new species I'm going to find. The Neches River also has one of the most diverse freshwater mussel population. Half of them are endangered, but they're still hanging on, and they're hanging on because it's an unpolluted river. Yes?
Run into the alligators?
You know, I'm canoeing, it's low water, I'm focusing on not hitting trees. I don't even see that I have canoed underneath an alligator. It's on a tree above my head. And it comes down right in front of me, head first, and just barely misses my canoe. And I tell Adrian about this experience, and he says, "You're so lucky. I've never seen a gator in a tree." And my heart is just like... We saw a lot of big gators. And if I remember this story when we were at the Beaver Lagoon with the bright yellow light, one of the things that I discovered when we would be out, I would kind of follow Adrian. He didn't want me to, and he would go out to try to photograph beavers at night. And we would come back to camp, and there was about a 10-foot alligator between the beaver lodge and our tents. And it was always staring at our tents. And I said, the beavers are, that's their buddy. They've got a friendship. And Adrian said, "No, Adrian, Charles, he's just waiting for a beaver to come out to eat a beaver." And I said, "Well, why isn't he looking at the beaver dam? He's looking right at us." And it was there 2 nights in a row. It was kind of interesting. And at the same...
It's smart to come out when there's an alligator.
You think so?
Probably. So
Yeah?
He was looking at you because humans aren't.
Some of the experience, I know it's kind of fanciful, and I'm making things up and I'm exaggerating things a little bit. I think these beavers are on to us, and that we shouldn't be harassing this beaver lodge. It's got a baby beaver in it, and they mew like a kitten. And when you hear the mother come in, and then the baby beaver stops mewing, she's nursing the beaver, baby beaver, and then all is good. And then Adrian's harassing them. And so I'm telling Adrian, we really should get out of here. The alligator doesn't want us here, the mama beaver doesn't want us here, and all of a sudden I see a venomous snake go underneath my tent. And when I get Adrian to help me pull my tent up, it's camped out right underneath where my pillow is. And I think the beaver sent the snake. So, anything else?
Charles, how many days do you think you spent on the river in those 2 years?
We spent 189 days on the river. We canoed for 7 years, every month. Only, once in July, but still we did it. Only once in January, because it's just unbelievably cold. And some of our trips were as long as 12 days, which is about all the food we could carry. I had this great big canoe until the beavers stole it. And I carried all the water, all the food, and that allowed Adrian to have a smaller canoe so he could go off by himself and do whatever he wanted to do. We often camped apart. We really kind of enjoyed that. We go together, we take care of each other, and then we have 2 or 3 days to photograph on our own and experience the place without another person around us. One of my trips with him that he went somewhere else, I'm camped by myself, and in the dead of night I hear this call that I've never heard before. By this time, I think I've heard every animal that's out there. I know all the barred owls called. Barred owls are the most vocal of all the owls in North America. They are very prolific on the Neches River. They don't live in Dallas, I don't think, yet. And it sounds like this. It's like, hey you, hey you. Like somebody's calling you, you know, like you're supposed to go out and find out what this creature is. And so I would go out at 2 o'clock in the morning to find out what this creature was, and it would go silent. So I figured, oh, it's a night creature of some sort. It can see me. And yet, I'd go back to my tent, and it would start out, hey you, hey you. So I never see this creature, silent during the day, and then one time though, I scare up an owl, and I think that's what it is. It's an owl that has been knocked off course from a big storm. Finally, a barred owl shows up, and they start having this wild talking. One of them saying, hey you, and the other owl is talking up a storm. I go home and I search the internet, and it turns out hey you was a female barred owl asking for a mate. And when the male came, he's talking like a normal bird. So I think we're about out of time. Yes? Yes.
Charles, it's good to meet you because I'm a friend of Adrian.
I know. You could probably tell stories about him.
And I could tell stories. I love him to death, and I just want to say he was a great friend on other environmental stuff when this club supported fighting the Keystone XL pipeline.
Correct.
Mapped the entire route from Cushing to the coast.
He did, and I even went on one of these journeys with him to photograph an oil spill in Caddo Lake. And it was, we were basically warned and told we're going to arrest you if you don't leave. And so Adrian gets us in a boat, and we come in from the boat side. And he says, now Charles, I want you to stay with the boat in case I get arrested. So he really can do it, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Charles, thank you. Don't forget, Charles will be signing and selling his book after the meeting. I forgot, I want to introduce one more unseen person. We have a new refreshment coordinator. So that's where all the food and drink you enjoyed this evening came from. And her name is Jasmine Jai. Did I get that right? Okay, so before we adjourn, remember Sierra Club 101 back in that corner? And another thing is, after all of this hooting and hollering, is what do you got there?
Calendars, don't forget.
Calendars, don't forget your calendars. They're cheap. Special deal. Most popular calendar in America, right?
That's right.
Now, after we get rid of all of this hooting and hollering is over, a group of people, what's going on? Oh, I thought somebody was breaking down the tables. A group of people will go to the Blue Goose, which is up on Midway, south of Beltline, and eat, drink, and be merry, and the club will hit for a couple trays of nachos. So if you're into that kind of stuff, show up there after the meeting, and we'll continue with our camaraderie. Wendell?
Victoria and Renee, what's next month's program?
We have Dr. Perry and his wife Dottie coming and talking about the environmental effects on our health on a day-to-day basis. I am personally very excited about that because my health is affected today from the crazy environment and I'm congested. So it's very timely and I am looking forward. We hope you all come back and hear Dr. and Mrs. Perry educate us even more about why we need to protect our environment and keep the air clean.
I had several patients today that I work in the clinics in Park. I work in the clinics at Parkland, and today we had several people come through just for allergies, sinus, and things of that nature. So it's real important, and a lot of us are suffering. Some people have the flu right now.
All right, this meeting is adjourned.